the parametric modeling as it is called by the vendor. Okay, others don't call it because parametric modeling is everything. And we also saw some limitations that the sequential solution cannot handle coupled constraints, and therefore the constraints have to be, distinct and independent of in every step. One step cannot refer to the previous step in its solution. Okay. And therefore, the simultaneous solution is the preferred way of doing parametric modeling. And as I said, the sequence, I think somewhere I might have written, I'm not able to find it now, but you start with a sketch, which is defined by these parameters and constraints, and then you sort of sweep it to get the 2D. Maybe it is somewhere over here. Let's see. Oh, it's nowhere here. Here. Right. So you have these dimensions and constraints to flesh out the sketch in the form of a 2D BREP, and then you can do extrusion or sweep or revolution to get the solid, and then you can further manipulate the solid in your system. Right. And then towards the end of that, we started looking at the sort of big advantage or the big reason why this is so powerful and liked by designers, in that the design intent sort of is always protected, right? And the example that we saw was that of a hole drilled inside a part, where the designer's intent might have been to have the hole be a through hole, right? Now, if you do it normally and do this, you will get the part. But now if you want to go back and change the thickness of this part, right? In the normal modeling, the hole will remain where it was originally. And so what was a through hole, after the increase in the thickness of this piece, will become a blind hole and therefore violate the design intent. And that's a nuisance for the designer. And that is the lacuna or the gap that the parametric modeling fills, which is that it is able to link, right, dimensions, we call them parameters, across shapes, right? So in this example here, the thickness or the height of the ring feature is matched to perhaps the depth of the hole feature, or the opening surface of this is matched to the opening surface, the top surface of that, whichever way you do it. But there is a linkage, and therefore whenever changes happen, the system keeps track of those changes and automatically change this here. So that's the power of parametric modeling, and it allows the design intent to be captured across design changes, and that makes it very interesting or powerful. Yeah. Okay, so that's essentially about this, and then we sort of changed gears and started looking at a slightly different problem, right, which is the representation of a cylinder, right? Now, remember, the bounding surface for the cylinder, a solid cylinder, happens to be these three faces: the top face, the bottom face, and the longitudinal cylindrical face, right? But the longitudinal cylindrical face, in some sense, is a smooth face, and there are no discontinuities there. And so our structure of providing edges at discontinuities sort of don't work too well here, right? And visually, it looks very disconcerting to say that my object has three faces, and these are the three faces, right? That's a little tricky because there is a face here, right? But we don't have any bounds to that in the longitudinal direction, and so it doesn't look, consistent with the kind of geometry or boundary representations that we have seen. And so the practice was to introduce something artificial here as a vertex to define the edges in a manner that we are used to, and then another edge here to define this face in a manner we are used to. But that also is not very convenient, because then we have, one edge incident on the same face on either side, and that again becomes tricky for us to manage, and therefore people discretize it a little bit more. I introduce some false, what I might call pseudo discontinuities, and a good representation that is consistent with everything that we have studied in terms of the validity conditions and checks, etc., is a representation that looks like this. Okay, so that's what the BREP representation will do. But one can carry forward this whole idea of discretization to a logical end and end up with a representation that looks like this. So here I have four-sided edges to represent each face. Right? Here I have many faces, right? Starting with one face for the longitudinal region, to two faces, to many faces, right? But while the number of faces have increased, one interesting thing has happened, which is that every face now in this representation or discretization of the boundary happens to be a triangle, three edges, right? So there is a certain, what shall I say, repetitiveness about this representation, that every face is a triangle, therefore operations on the faces become somewhat easier. Because triangle is a linear structure, right? Intersection is easy, finding distance from triangle is easy. A lot of things become easy as opposed to curved surfaces. That's point one. The second point, of course, is that this benefit doesn't come without a price. The price being that by using a discretization like this or like this to represent a surface like that, we introduce some errors, some approximations, right? So the actual CAD model is the light blue line that is going below. The facets that we have got in the term of edges of the faces are these red lines, and there is a deviation between the two. And clearly, the less tessellation I do, the more the error will be. The more tessellation I do, the less the error will be. The reason why this is of interest to us, like I mentioned in the last class, is that today we have enormous capabilities to generate these kind of mesh representations, right? So this representation that I have here, which is also a boundary representation, right, is referred to often as a surface mesh. My bounding surface is no longer tracked, right, across discontinuities and represented as smooth surfaces, but rather the boundary surface or the bounding surface is represented as a mesh of triangles. And that's my representation. What that means is that every face in my BREP is a triangle, but other than that, all other conditions remain the same. You have your same validity conditions, closed, orientable, so non-self-intersecting. And all of that remains. The checks for them also remain the same. Every edge is part of two triangles. The orientation of this edge in this triangle must be opposite to the orientation of this edge, same edge in the neighboring triangle. All of that remains, except that the number of faces are large and each face is a triangle. Now, why is that important? As I said, that and here we just try to cover all the types of representations that you have seen so far: the smooth, continuous BREP, the procedural model, the CSG, or the parametric type model that we have just seen. That's the procedural model, and finally now the dense mesh of triangles on the surface is referred to as a discrete representation. Okay, so we started to talk about drivers, so I'll just stop here. If there is any questions on all these material, please ask me now. Otherwise, I'll continue with the discrete representation. Any questions? Okay. So we were talking about why this has become important, right? From a design task perspective, right? These three have been the sort of drivers of this representation. Physical prototype driven design. As I said, even today in several organizations where styling of the device is concerned, the external appearance of the device is concerned, right? It is still done by the designers with their hands in some sense by sculpting, right? And the only thing is, of course, they don't do a full-scale model because that is very difficult to handle. They will try and work with model makers and create a scaled model. So there will be a sketch given to a model maker, and the model maker will then, use some soft pliable material and mold it to the shape that the designer wants. And once that is approved by the designer and the management, then you convert that into a CAD model. Now, unlike the example that we saw in the beginning of the class where we said the draftsman will go with their protractors and dividers and scales, here I now have technology which will generate points on the surface by the millions, right? The scanners and the range cameras, right? So I can easily convert the physical prototype to a mesh of triangles, which can then drive my design process as a representation. Same thing, another motivation for the physical prototype driven design is in transfer of technologies, right? Typically, sometimes components and parts are given, but drawings are not given, right? And therefore, a lot of effort has to go in reverse engineering the physical part, right, through scanning and other additional methods to convert a proper CAD model or an engineering drawing for that. And lastly, of course, is inspection, where the idea is that you scan the machined or manufactured part and create a model of the manufactured part, which can be compared with the nominal part. Right? There are some other applications in engineering and product development, right, where the surface mesh type representation now has become very interesting, right? The first and foremost of them is this whole domain of creating physical parts called layered manufacturing, right? Some of you may already know what this is, and some of you will probably go on to study this. But let me just give a quick 2-minute definition or illustration of this process. So essentially what it does is that, so supposing I have something that has a very complex curve information in one dimension, right? So instead of trying to produce this and curved surface entirely in one go, the idea is that we do it in layers, right? So the first layer is here, the second layer is somewhat different, the third layer is somewhat different, and so forth, and I get this shape. Right? And that's how the part gets built. So this is built layer by layer, and that's why the name layered manufacturing. Now, that is not so critical. What is critical is that the company and the person who first discovered one of the more popular versions of this process called the stereolithography, right? SLA. They figured out that, the machine that they had created, right, which will basically trace a laser, right, on a film of liquid. So I have a film of photopolymer here, and the laser will trace a contour. And on the plan, if you see, it may trace a contour that looks like this, and it will solidify, right, along that contour. And it can trace another contour, and then it will trace these patterns inside. And so you get one layer that looks like this, a hollow part with a complex curves, right? That's the process, right? Yeah. But as I said, that's not important. What is important is that they realize that this process with the laser and the chiller and, all kinds of paraphernalia, right, will probably succeed as a service opportunity, which meant that people would have to send their CAD models to the service operators and get the physical prototypes back. And since this has to process the CAD file inside, and clearly they cannot write this processor for every CAD format that was available then, right? Each CAD system will have its own format. One system may store splines with a degree, another may store splines with order, right? Some may count their control points from 0, some will count their control points from 1, right? Some may not store number of control points or degree, but store the size of the knot vector, right? So many, changes and differences are possible. So they realize that they cannot obviously write these programs for multiple CAD formats. And they decided that they will pick one format and expect every CAD file to convert to the CAD format, and send it to them. And the format they arrived at was the triangular mesh. And in some sense, the format that was most popular for the triangular mesh was given the name, .stl, which stands for stereolithography, which is also the process that they were using, right? They were using a laser to basically, create a solid out of a photopolymer. Okay. And so that's how this triangular mesh became a popular representation. Now they chose a triangular mesh primarily because, right, a triangle, right, V1, V2, V3, right? There is no way that there can be any ambiguity in representation of this. The only mistake anybody can do is that one may represent it as this, another may represent it as this. That's the only switch that can happen. Other than that, there is no ambiguity in its representation. And that was the big attraction for these people, that the CAD information comes to them in a clear way with no ambiguity, so that their program can work on it without having to make any fixes, right? Later, they realized that they need one more information, which is the orientation of material, and so they added the normal information. So that was the other information that was added. But that again is a vector, and therefore there is no ambiguity in the representation of this as well. So vertices and the normal, that was enough. And there are only 3 vertices, and therefore there was no issue at all. And so it became a very easy representation for people to create, and it was also an easy representation for people to consume, right? So one of the things, as you can see here, right, in this operation itself, that has to happen is that your 3D CAD model has to be intersected with planes and these contours found, right? So each of these contours is an intersection of one plane with the object at some place, right? Now, as I said, if my object is represented as a surface mesh, my intersection is between a triangle and a plane. And this is the easiest problem that you can solve, right? 2 linear entities, and it is even more easy if I can turn this so that it becomes Z is equal to 0 plane. Immediately I can, make my intersection process very efficient. I don't have to worry about, triangles that are very far away, from this plane. I don't have to worry about them at all, right, in terms of Z. So a lot of efficiencies are possible, and this became a very popular representation, and so CAD systems had to support it. Now there are these other fields, right, of digital art, right? This is called virtual reality, where again, the triangle became a popular representation. Now, the reason why in these 2 cases the triangle became a very popular representation is again for obvious reasons. In digital art, the main thing, of course, is to finally render the object, draw the object, right? You're designing a game. You have created an interesting world that looks like downtown Bangalore, and the car is driving through downtown Bangalore for some thrills or other things that these game players do, right? But you have to render this very fast now, right? Because the car is moving, the scene has to change along with the car, right? And the actors who are in the game do something, so again they introduce changes. So rendering has to be quite fast, and the fastest thing that you can render today in a shaded format is a triangle, right? So once I know the vertices, I can quickly render it. And therefore, this became a very strong representation for gaming and the digital art industry. Likewise, virtual reality, right? Again, some of you may or may not have encountered this before, but essentially the idea is that I have a digital model of the object or the artifact, and I allow the human user to interact with this artifact with the feeling of a real part, right? So you can see it in 3 dimensions. You can lean forward and get the sensation of grabbing it in your hands, moving it, and so forth, right? People have also started having more realism with other interfaces such as touch or haptics, right? And so therefore, this has become a very powerful means of interacting with the digital artifacts. Now, one of the main problems in virtual reality, right, is to know relative distances between the human actor as well as these objects in 3D world, right? So if you want to give the feeling to the user that they are touching it, then you must know what the relative positions are between the 2. And that again is a computation that is easiest done when I have triangles. Right? Distance between triangles, whether two triangles intersect or not. All of that can be done very fast with a triangle. Right? And therefore, these, technology in the form of scanning and imaging systems and needs in the form of these areas, right, led to this new representation become very popular, surface mesh representation. And in two phrases, if we have to summarize this, the user can generate it very easily, millions of triangles in no time, right, by just using a range camera or a scanner. Likewise, querying them becomes very easy. Does it intersect another object? Does it interfere with another object? How far is it from me? All of these are very easily answered, right? And so, this is a very popular representation, right? And of course, this is going forward. We have how to support multiple representations, right? We cannot henceforth assume that my CAD system will only consist of a boundary representation with faces, edges, and vertices and loops, etc. Right? I may have a surface mesh, which is another kind of a boundary representation, and of course the feature model or the parametric models. Right? And each have their own, sort of strengths. And so what it implies is that the future CAD system will have to sort of keep, all three in play for the user. Whenever they want, they can use the BREP. Whenever they want, they can use the surface mesh. And whenever they want, they can use the features. Right? So for example, if to move back and forth between triangles and features, right? One of the things that if you were to take Professor Deb's class on CAEPD, right? Engineering, computer-aided engineering for product development, you will find that while my part has some very complex features, right? I may have a fillet, I may have a chamfer, all kinds of details will be there. But for analysis, they would not like to analyze a part like this. Rather, they would like to analyze a part like this. Right? Which means that both the chamfer and the fillet have to be removed. Right? So if I have a mesh representation, then how do I identify this and remove it? Right? And so you need to go back and forth between the triangle or the mesh representation and the feature representation. Likewise, construction, right? You cannot construct triangles for a part from scratch. You can image or scan a part if a physical prototype exists. But if a physical prototype doesn't exist, you cannot create a triangular mesh. So you have to create a smooth model and then extract triangles from that. Right? And so, it's a case where you may have to go back and forth between smooth geometry or exact geometry or a BREP and a surface mesh or a bunch of triangles. Okay. A very simple, I don't know simple, but an example of this problem arises in the case of composite manufacture, right? So the way composites are done is that I have my nominal surface, right? Let's say the fuselage of a plane, right, has some shape. And on this, they will lay the composite tapes. To make this, there is a mandrel, and on the mandrel, they will lay these tapes, right? So I have one layer of a tape in one orientation, then another layer of a tape in a slightly different orientation, and I keep building it up till I get my geometry that I'm interested in, right? So this geometry I get here finally. Now, this is the one that has to be passed to the tool maker or the manufacturer, because they have to press the composite materials with this mandrel so that it takes the final shape that it is given here, right? But we know that given a surface, the offset of that surface is not an exact surface, right? So this may be a NURBS surface, but the offset of this is not guaranteed to be a NURBS surface. And so I have points, then I have another set of points, another set of points, and finally I have a mesh of points here, and I find a surface out of that, and then I pass it to the tool maker. And so you need to go back and forth. right? So that's the sort of complexity that is emerging now in terms of your CAD systems, that we will no longer have, a BREP and possibly a feature model, but you will go back and forth between these representations like this. Okay. Finally, just to sort of see where we are at, right? The reason why the sort of mesh representation is very, very attractive to a lot of applications is the first bullet here, right? And it may say something that looks very abstract to you, but I will try to explain this, computational complexity versus combinatorial complexity, right? If you look at the surface-surface intersection problem, right? We explained to you the kind of problem that we had in the intersection of two surfaces, right? That, we cannot solve this exactly. We can only get points, and then, the points cannot be fit into a curve that lies on both the surfaces. So we have all kinds of problems, right? Now, the same thing, if my surfaces are represented as triangles, right, it becomes very easy, right? All I have are triangles on one face, intersecting triangles on another face, and I just have to connect them. Right? Sorry. Right? And I have triangles. Right? So here, each task is very simple. One triangle intersecting another triangle. It's a very easy task. But I have to do this many times. Here, I just have to find S1 of UV equals S2 of TW. I have to do this only once, right? But here I have an advantage. It's the same task being done many times, so I can do parallel processing, right? Or I can have a more powerful CPU, and my task becomes faster. Here, it's not a question of me having a faster CPU or many CPUs. I must have a smarter way of doing this problem. I don't have one yet, right? So this is what we call computational complexity. It is a complex computational problem. The computation itself is complex. Here, the computation is simple, but I have to do it many times. So it's a combinatorial complexity, meaning that it's a complexity to do with doing simple things large number of times. The problem is that if I have a faster computer, I can do this better. On this, it has no impact. Okay. So if I have a better computer, I have a parallel, many computers, many core computing machines, right? Then all of them will impact the efficiency of this, right? Because I'm doing the same thing. I can apportion it to multiple triangles. I can say the 100 triangles from here go to the first subprocessor, 100 triangles, next 100 go to another one, next 100 go to another one, like that, right? So when 6 of them are doing, I can do this in 1/6 of the time. Here, no such luck. So that's the advantage, that both computing power and number of processors will impact this representation and not this representation. Which is why today, it is very popular, because the computing power is increasing quite dramatically. Now, that does not mean that you don't have to, the BREP that you have studied will become useless, primarily because you cannot create the mesh from scratch, right? You need some geometry to create the mesh. And therefore, you always have to have these tools, like the one you are studying in this class, to be able to create geometry. A related problem is that, editing the mesh models is also very difficult, right? So for example, if I have a mesh model of a hole, right? I have a whole bunch of triangles, defining this hole, right? Now, if I want to increase the diameter of the hole, I cannot do it in the mesh model, right? Because I have to worry about tweaking so many vertices and make sure that they are correctly done. None of the triangles become of 0 size because I have increased the size of the hole. Therefore, editing is also very difficult. And lastly, right, if I have a mesh representation of a hole, the CAD system does not know that there is a hole in the part, because there are no features in this, right? So you can't then exploit saying that, okay, find all the holes and put a peg, try and see if this peg inserts into that, say maybe for assembly planning. And therefore, you cannot do reasoning at the level of features in a mesh model. So these are the three reasons why CAD and BREF will still survive. But these are the reasons why you have to be appreciative of the advantages of a surface mesh-based model. Okay. Fine. So that's pretty much everything about this mesh representation that I wanted to talk about. There are a couple of things that I would still like to do, and I'm hoping that I can finish it on Monday. One is to see if I can talk to you a little bit about quality of surfaces. And I'm going to ask one of my students to talk about another approach to design and modeling that is coming up, called generative design and visual operators to model, right? So we will see if we can do it either over the weekend or next Wednesday. I don't know whether next Wednesday is the last class or Tuesday is the last class, but we will try and figure that out. But otherwise, we are pretty much done as far as the material is concerned. We will meet once on Monday to mop up everything else that I think I need to do. Two other logistic things. One is that there are two more quizzes that you must take, one on surfaces and one on solids. So you need to plan on dates, for both. The last one, for the purposes of the institute is the final. So we may have to do it on the day they have announced the final for the this slot, and so we can have that. If you want, we can have both quizzes together, or we can have one next week and one on the day of the final. So that is something that you must collectively decide and inform me very quickly. Otherwise, I'll just announce 2 dates and you'll have it on those 2 dates. Assignments are being given to you and they are being collected back, and so hopefully finish that as well, so that we can turn in the grades on time. Is Deepak there?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would like to just introduce Deepak quickly. He is, of course, one of you, and he has kindly volunteered to take this demonstration lecture today, where I'm hoping that he'll be able to cover this issue of constructing surfaces from cloud of points. In the earlier classes, we used to also show you a scanning demo, physically scanning a piece so that you could see it. Unfortunately, this time we are not able to do that, but I guess the plan is to share some data with you so that you can practice whatever you learned today from Deepak. So we will try to send you point data. I think, Kumari, we are going to send them point data from last year itself, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we can share the object from which it was taken, so that I don't know whether it is going to be done before or after, but anyway, you will have that, and you will have point data so that you can practice how to construct a surface from this point data. And I will now hand it over to Deepak to continue that session. I will probably stay for a while and then I have to leave because these research interviews are going on. So I need to join that. But he can continue till whatever time he needs and finish that off today. Thank you very much. Yeah. Deepak?
So can you show the image of the clay model?
Yeah.
Of the clay model, I select an image, with the markers. You can just show one.
Yeah, you can give it to Deepak if he wants to show it. Otherwise, when you send the point cloud, we can share it with them. Not a problem.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, Deepak, all yours.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Now you can. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Deepak, second year MDes student. So today I'll be sharing with you about my experience in how to convert cloud point data to a surface model. So usually what we do is we usually take 3D markers and then place it on surfaces and then take cloud point data. So here are some of the examples as you can see here. So the cloud point data collection starts with reference markers. So these are the popular ones are 3M markers. So what happens is in case there are intricate designs or intricate surfaces which you want to get data of, for example, mostly extensively used in automotive engineering, automotive design. So what happens is the industrial design expert or the automotive exterior design expert, they kind of do clay modeling for the car. And then once the clay modeling is done, they have to somehow extract the data and then give it to the computer. So why this process is needed is we need a mathematical representation of whatever the shape they're trying to build, an approximate mathematical model of the surface in order to go with the production of the car or production of the parts in subsequent stages. For example, if you want to 3D print something which you have made with your hand, you need to have the geometry represented in mathematical form so that you can slice the models. Or if you want to do a surface extrusion, or when you want to stamp things like here in the hood of the car, which goes later. So what you have to do is to get a mathematical model so that you can machine the tool surfaces in that shape. So to convert any handmade physical model and then and to approximate into a mathematical model, we use this 3D scanning. So these are the markers. So these markers are in specific shape and color. As you can see here, it's like mostly black out and white inside. So what happens is the 3D scanner is placed in one particular frame of reference, and then it is moved along in a steady manner across the entire model. So what the scanner will do is it will try to locate each of the marker in the 3D space and then capture location. So each marker will become a cloud point in the cloud point data in a nutshell. So finally you will get a cloud point of data which will have XYZ coordinate with respect to a frame of reference. So this is the cloud point data that we are talking about. And let me show you one of the yes, this was our seniors project. So as you can see here, this is the 3D scanning model of a bottle. So what they did was they made a 3D clay model and then stuck a lot of these stickers and then scan this model. As you can see here, this is entirely made up of cloud points, and then the 3D viewer of my computer has somehow meshed them together to show it in form of abstract surfaces. Now there are many things to it, and there are many procedures to follow on how to reference the object and how to take orientation of the object and so on and so forth. So which I will be telling with the help of an example. So I usually use SolidWorks to convert cloud point data to surface model or solid model. So what you have to do is, first of all, you have to add in the scan to 3D add-in. So what you do is you open the SolidWorks, whichever version you are using, and then go to add-ins. And inside add-ins, you will find an option called scan to 3D. So now in SolidWorks, what happens is they have a separate kind of scanner called next-gen scanners. So you can connect them directly to SolidWorks, and then that the process becomes much easier. But when you're using a third-party scanner, you get a cloud point data as I showed earlier, and then you have to import it. So once you click on this, the plugin will load in. And after loading in the plugin, when you try to open any file, so you must go to scan to 3D mesh files. So these third-party files or even the next generation scanner files, they will be saved in a format called .ply, which stands for polygon. So as you can see here, .ply. So click on that, and only those which represent that kind of format will appear. Now I'll be showing one example here. Yeah, and before importing the file, when you go to options, there are certain options available for you. One is sorry, not this one. Yeah, here you can create a mesh body. So what happens is the entire body will come as a mesh. Otherwise, if you don't click this option and click as either solid body or a surface body, your entire body, the SolidWorks, what will try to do is it will try to approximate itself and then come up with a model. So we don't want that. So we are trying to create a mesh and then do it here. So this is another project from our senior batch. So you can see this is the 3D scan that they have got. Now what happens here is you can see that there are a lot of discrepancies. So each of this triangle represent one patch of surface. So the entire 3D model or the entire cloud point is made up of these patches, and the nodes of this are the cloud point data actually. So the lines are drawn in between them to represent them in form of patches, which makes up the whole 3D model as a visualization now. So how to proceed with this is, this will be your dialog box or your screen that appears to you initially. Now you have to open the scan to 3D toolbox in order to access the various functions that is happening here. So you go to this top toolbar, right click, you go to toolbars again, and then scan to 3D option will come. So when you click that, you will get a small dialog box. So I'm not sure if the icons are visible because it's small, but what these icons are, there are 5 icons basically. The first one is the mesh preparation wizard, where you will try to prepare the mesh of the particular cloud point data. The next is the mesh edit data. So once you have prepared a mesh, this is just a visualization mesh, then what you are actually trying to do is to refine this mesh in the first step. The second step, if there are any other refinements like offsetting it or deleting some points or moving some points particular to a local frame of reference, you do it here. The third one is the curvature wizard, so which basically you can slice up the model into different planes, and then you can manually draw curves, and then you can join them together. It's just like in like UV curves or double bend curves. So you can have a boundary surface patch kind of arrangement here. And finally you get to the surface wizard. In surface wizard, after creating all this mesh, finally you will try to approximate a surface over the mesh whichever you have created, and then extract the surface patches out of it. So I will go through this each step one by one. And finally you have a deviation analysis. So deviation analysis is nothing but you have the cloud point data, you have the final extracted surface. Now we are going to see what is the deviation that is happening between your extracted surface and then your initial data. With this you will be able to measure like what is the approximation of your model. So how approximate or how tolerant your model is. So you can change the way in which you proceed the first 4 steps in order to get better results in the deviation analysis. Now I'll be showing 2 examples. One is of course the 3D model. So here you can see that the entire model is captured in 3D form. So it has a surface in it's a 3D part, right? And second one is this. So what I have done here is just a minute. Yeah, this is a part of this model. So what I have done is I have deleted many points in this cloud. So has only one patch, that is I think this patch. Yeah, only one patch surface of the model comes. So the difference between these two is this one is a solid and this one will come as a surface model. So whenever you're trying to, this surface model is extensively used in automotive engineering. So the exterior body, the body panels, they are all made of this kind of surfaces, right? So when you're going for this kind of surfaces, you will use this surface modeling. And when you're trying to do projects or any other components or trying to reverse engineering something for a very quick analysis or a very quick 3D print, you can use this 3D type of analysis. But the thing here is it is much more difficult to approximate or create a good model of 3D structures. It's easier to make it is easier to handle 2D planes, as we can see here. Now first I will go with the 3D model thing and then do the complete process and then show you how to develop a surface out of it. And then after that we will go back to the surface and then we will see how to develop that as well. So yeah, the first step is to orient your model properly. So what you do is go to the mesh preparation wizard and click the mesh or the cloud file. So here, since we have only one cloud file, we are selecting only that. But in case if you have two different cloud files, let's say there are two parts kept nearby each other, and then you are scanning the two of them together. So you will have two clouds of points. You can select whichever point you want and proceed here. Now, this is a very important step in the sense this will determine how your product is being oriented along the path. So what you do is here you can select the orientation. So there are many methods to do it. One is you don't want any orientation itself. So there will be no reference plane with respect to the product. It will be just hanging in the space. You can still proceed with that, but then it will be difficult for you to view or orient them in the later stage. And second one is automatic. So this one, as you can see here, the coordinate system is here. When you see the front view, it is something like this. And then when you see the top view, it is something like this. So you can see that the SolidWorks itself has aligned the edges so that you can have it in a proper manner. But in case, let's say, if you're not able to do that, you can always have a numerical reference or a selected reference, wherein you give 4 points of reference. One is the origin point. So let's take this point to be origin. And now x-axis. So x-axis is this direction. I'm taking this direction as x-axis. So select any one point, any one cloud data point, and I want this to be my y direction, upward. So click on y-axis and click here. Now, as you know, the angle between the x-axis and the y-axis should be exactly 90 degree, but here we don't know. So this, if the origin, x-axis and y-axis are in the 90 degree, but what the software will do is it will try to make a best approximation of it and then try to make 90 degree axis with that. And how you can check that if you have done this correctly is it will automatically take the z-axis. Since you have given x and y, it will automatically take the z-axis. Or what you can do is to orient the product either in the positive z-axis or negative z-axis. So if you click here, you can see that the product is flipping downwards, which means that the origin point, the x and the y-axis have been plotted correctly. So after there is one more method also which is the numerical input. So where you give the x, y, z coordinates and their rotation parameters. So the 6 degree of freedoms are here, so you can play with that. But I'm going to go with the selected reference. So origin, x, y, and z can be flipped. Now if you press the space bar, there will be a cube kind of thing around it. If people who are familiar with SolidWorks will understand it. So now you can see that you have actually created a frame of reference or a frame point. You can see in this model tree here. So there will be actually a front plane, a top plane, and a right plane for the model. So that the planes and the reference and the orientation is what we have created in the last step. And the next step is remove area by noise. So this model, fortunately or unfortunately, does not have any noise with it or external noise with it. But what happens when you try to scan the 3D meshes, your product along with the reference table, the table in which you're keeping, may also come into play, or any other disturbance like some irrelevant points or irrelevant data or irrelevant patches. Some patches around here may come. Or what some people used to do is they used to place a reference cube. In place of doing the last thing, we selected the references arbitrarily, right? So there will be a reference cube which is in the shape of cube only, placed next to the component. So that will also get scanned into the product. So when you are orienting it, you can exactly select the edges of the cube to orient your product, in an upright manner. So in those kind of area, what you have to do is you will be required to remove certain areas or remove certain cloud points of this mesh only. So you either increase it or decrease it based on the volume. This is just like the lasso select or the magic wand in the Photoshop. So it is that kind of tool or calculation that is going behind it. But since here there is no extra or deletable points, how much ever you increase, there is nothing going to be deleted. So I'm going to the next option here, and this is an interesting option. So you see that there are many points here, and then there may be some extra points, which are very minute that it cannot be, or which is so associated with the model that it cannot be deleted in the latest in the previous stage. So here, what you try to do is you try to select you try to select particular cloud points and then delete them manually. So this is how I got from here to the surface model that I showed you in the other tab. And this will take some time because the number of points it has to calculate is high here. So let me just pass through this point so that so the options here are that you can have a lasso select, so you can select one particular square and then it will collect all the cloud point inside that, and you can click delete to delete that entire point. So let me give you one example only. This is slow because the number of point data here is high. So it will take some time for my computer to process it. So, maybe in the meantime, I may be able to tell you what should be the optimal file size for the cloud point. So it is counterintuitive that higher the file size, the worse the model is, because when you try in the sense that when you're trying to capture a particular model, you will need to abstract the model so much that you are getting as low reference point as possible. If you are having a very high number of cloud points, then it means that you are having redundant data or you are having a lot of noise. So the aim in cloud point data when you're converting from cloud point data to a surface model is that your file size, otherwise the reference plane and the curves that you're creating at last should be as small as possible. Okay, so I'll just skip through this point, but you get the idea, right? We have to simply select areas and then click the delete button here. That is gone. So I'll simply go to the next step because I think my computer will crash if I try again. Yeah. Now, after this, you have two parameters called global smoothness and other parameters, global simplification, I guess. Yes. So you get two parameters called global simplification and global smoothness. So both of these are very important in terms of abstracting your model or you're reducing the size of your model. So I have made a small sketch. Maybe I can share this with you. So let's say there are 4 points like this, and these are the 4 cloud points, and then the curve which passes through them is this. So what happens in simplification is it basically reduces the number of cloud points. So instead of the thing being like this, imagine if I simplify it, imagine that one point is getting deleted here. So the curve will no longer be like this, but it will be something like this. So now you can see that instead of this dip has gone and then the entire curve is simplified. This is called simplification. In case of smoothing, what will happen is let's imagine this is the case again, and now you know that each point has a particular affinity to the entire curve in itself. So it attracts the curve towards itself. So when you move this point upward, the curve also moves upward, right? So this will create a lot of crest and trough. That's how your model will become very porous, or it will look very sharp and it will look rough. So in smoothness, what happens is depending on the smoothness level you are giving, these points will try to come closer. So this point may come closer to this, and this point will come closer to this. So it comes closer to the mean value of all the points. So your entire curve smooths out. So this is the difference between simplification and smoothing. So how to use this is in case of simplification, when you use this, when you have a plane surface, and then when you have a plane, and then the plane itself is jumbled into many different planes. So you simplify it by reducing number of points so that it becomes a single plane. That is the role of simplification. Let me simplify this further and then show you. Yeah, I think you can see the difference. So the number of triangles or the number of mesh points here has reduced, and okay, I think the computer got stuck again, so I have to give it some time. Maybe I'll close this. Yeah. So what happens as you increase this bar is that the model gets abstracted. So the density of the cloud point reduces. So the number of points per unit volume given per unit volume reduces. So the entire module is becoming in a more abstract manner. It's like trying to represent a sphere in terms of many different patches. So like people who have already worked with SolidWorks or any other 3D software for that matter, as you zoom in and you can see that the sphere is becoming like more patchy. So this is that kind of thing that is going on. So when you zoom out, it becomes more smooth, right? So this is that kind of operation that is going on. And SolidWorks allows you to have two types of simplification. One is the global simplification where the entire model is simplified. And also you can have a local simplification. You can like the same four tools are available: the square tool, box selection, the lasso selection, and the polygon selection. So you can basically select any region you want, and then you can play around with the simplification in only the local region. So I'm going to simplify it a little further if it allows me. Yeah, so we'll go further, and now comes the smoothness. So if you can see here, if I increase the smoothness, yeah, you can see here like there were many, the model was rough, right? It has become more smooth now. As I increase it, you will be able to see the difference. I'm not sure if the smoothness is visible in your screen, but I can visually see it to be, these curves getting more smoother and smoother. So when to use this simplification and smoothness is, simplification I already told, but when to use smoothness is when you have a particular curve, this like something like this, and you want to make it, curvy. So one flip side of this smoothness is when you have edges, it will try to smoothen the edges also. So the value that you give here, the bar that you set here has to be optimal. So there is no there is no fixed rule behind this. It's just your intuition to move this scale up and down and see visually the entire product. I mean, rotate and see it. And if it is satisfactory to you at this visualization, then you proceed further. And this also allows for local smoothness settings also. And finally, what happens is if your model has any holes in it, like a dedicated hole in it, you can always plug that hole, or you can always leave that hole open, or you can define that as a hole only. So here, since this is a big model, there are a lot of discrepancies in the model, and then it detects many holes here. So but actually there are no holes here. So I'm simply going to go further. Now, in my experience, what happens is when you now what we have done so far is to finish the first step, that is the mesh preparation. So we have prepared the mesh. So next thing to do is to check the curvature and to check the surface of it. So if you click OK directly, what will happen is most probably your computer is going to hang. That is what happens to me all the time. So what you do is to uncheck the launch surface wizard. So you click OK. So what happens is the SolidWorks saves whatever file you have done so far, and this cannot be taken back. So once you have deleted some cloud point data in the name of abstraction, the points are gone. But the cloud point data, that is the PLY file which you have, will be originally saved, which you can use it later. So now the first step is done, right? So now going to the second step, that is the mesh edit. So now we mostly don't use mesh edit. So mesh edit is in case if you want to offset the entire product or move one particular node or something like that. I mean, make final adjustments like translating it in X, Y, and Z directions. So we mostly don't use it. We have already given the reference point, so let it be there only. And the third, now coming to the third point, the curvature wizard. Now the curvature wizard is mostly more used in the 2D surface. That is the surface conversion of surface. Now, since this is like in a 3D model, what happens is it's not mostly useful, but anyway, we'll go through it. Now, there are three methods of doing it. One is discrete, section, and boundary. So we mostly use section and boundary. So in section, what happens is you select a particular section. So this is the plane wizard. So it asks you to select a plane or a pair of points to define a normal plane to it. So I'm going to click on this. I'm then simply going to click one plane from here. So it's going to take that plane into consideration. And the next it asks is to point on the start plane. So this becomes your start plane, and then you click, and then you click on a particular point. So what happens is you click on apply, and then wait for it to generate a curve. And so what the curve looks like is it will create a curve, a B-spline curve, which fits this profile. That is what it does. So you can imagine when you have multiple planes here, you will have multiple curves, and then if you do the same operation in the perpendicular direction, you will have doubly curved lines, which you can later do some other operations like you can go to surfaces, for example, and then you can have filled surface or boundary surface. You can do that kind of operation. So I will not do that now because it will take a lot of time to process that. The next thing is the boundary thing. So boundary, it is mostly used in 2D plane, but the idea here is that instead of going in sections, the boundary option will smoothen out the boundaries. So in this case, these boundary sections. I'll explain these two more in the 2D plane thing. And finally, we come to the surface wizard. So the idea here is that when you reach this point, it is assumed that you have a model or a point of data, the cloud point data, which is in an abstract form, or by abstract I mean that it is in the desired form. It is in the desired density of model, and it is in the desired size, and it best represents your interests. So you click on the model which you have to create plane surfaces of. So you create this entire mesh, and then click this next button. Now this is probably the most important step in creation of the surface. You will be given two options here. One is the automatic creation, and one is the guided creation. In automatic creation, what happens is SolidWorks itself decides which operation to be done in order to get this surface. So whether it is extrusion or loft or revolve, that kind of operations, and it will try to create a model on itself. So you will not be able to access how the SolidWorks came to that final conclusion. So let us see how it was. So you finally go, and then for right now I'll give the surface data like this only. So what happens is, like you can see, it is taking time to process the model, and then what it will give is it will give you surfaces. You can then later extract the surfaces and use it for later modeling. Okay, in the meantime, I'll be telling you about what is this surface dial bar. So when it's simple. So when you put the bar at the right extreme, it will try to take in all the details possible in this cloud point. And if you take it to the left, it will now try to take as less data as possible. So this is kind of a fine tuning that happens after you have abstracted all your model. So here you can see that there are many red regions which represent basically there are errors there. So there might be some kind of form of discontinuity or a broken model there. So if you zoom there, you can see here. Yeah, so this is a broken model. So the cloud point data are not meshed properly, and then you have to alter the parameters which you have done in the previous stages to get a better surface. So when you go to this smooth view, you will see that this is the kind of surface that you will be getting. So there's a discrepancy here as well. So in case if you're going for your MDES project, or for that matter any project, you're going to 3D print this particular part, it is advisable that you go and convert this to an STL file. When you convert this to an STL, you can directly go and save as an STL file directly. Now what happens in STL file is the STL model, what it does is it slices the entire model into different planes, and it tries to draw a curve or create a path in which the nozzle has to move to create a particular section. So there is some approximation, very fine approximation, which happens in the software for slicing and path generation in as well. So I use Cura mostly. So the nozzle size of Cura is 0.1 mm. So this kind of curvatures or this kind of wrinkles will not be even possible, will not be even happening in Cura. So if you were to ask me, this model is, I think it is good for a Ultimaker Cura desktop printer. So if you can go ahead with this. But then if you're going for a tooling purpose or a machining purpose, so in case if you have to machine this product, then you will have to generate G codes. Now, if you're generating G codes, you will be probably using different tool sizes or different tools to machine this particular path. And then even a small discrepancy there, could cause a permanent removal of materials. So in case if you're going for molding or tooling, then this kind of model is not good. You will have to refine this more further. Now, how to, this will be more explained in the 2D thing. So let's go there. So this is a patch of cloud or a density of cloud points that I got from the 3D model. So what I basically did is I deleted some parts to get this. Now let's see how to do this. So let's take an example of let's say a helicopter blade or a helicopter blade for a toy. Let's say you have made a paper model, which you think will best represent its aerodynamic property, the curvature and other stuff. But you exactly don't know what should be the equation for those curves, or what should be the B-spline curves, or how you represent the curves in your computer so that you can get to a plastic injection molding manufacturer and then tell them that, okay, wait, I want this kind of geometry to get the exact blade every time out of the plastic molding, plastic injection molding. So let's assume this is the mesh data that you got, from scanning in the 3D scanning. So you follow the same process. You go to mesh cloud, mesh preparation wizard. You click on the mesh. You go to next. And here I don't have it's not a 3-dimensional as it was in the previous case. So I'm just going to go with automatic and then see if it best fits my interest. So if I select the front view, yeah, it's good. And if I go to the side view, okay, and then if I go to the top view, yeah, you can see that it is almost approximately aligned good. So I'll just accept this automatic setting and go to the next. And yeah, here, like I said, you can remove unwanted data, which I was not able to demonstrate in the 3D model. So here, since the number of points is less, I think I'll be able to demonstrate that. So I have the box tool selected. You just simply go over the nodes, select the nodes, and then click delete, and it gets deleted. As simple as that. And lasso select is like select it and delete it, and polygon is something like this. You draw a polygon and it gets selected. And brush is basically select like using a sketch kind of brush. Now here there is an interesting option. It's called allow selection depth adjustment. So if you press this and then if you select it, so what happens is this area will get converted to a three-dimensional area, three-dimensional volume. So this will particularly useful in terms of 3D models. So like in the previous case that we saw. So if you're selecting at one particular face and then it creates a three-dimensional volume in which all the faces get deleted. So this is the depth associated with the selection. So you can toggle that on or off. Now going to the next, and here you have the global simplification and global. The other option is smoothness. Yeah. So here you can see the its effect more easily. So if I increase the simplification, you can see that how the model has been abstracted. So the number of cloud points has reduced. There are a lot of points here which are basically now this point, like all merged to this one point. If I reduce this, as I keep reducing this, you can see that number of cloud points increases. So the data size also increases. So you always try to find a perfection between the number of points and the data of the model. So you have to be in a sweet spot where there is not more data lost, but then you also have to see that you don't have any extra data which unnecessarily complicates your model. Now I will go with some 30% of simplification, and then for smoothness I'll still go with some half the way. So you can see that the model here, the curve, the patches across is smooth. This is something like C2 continuous. So when the smoothness is 0, a perfect way of defining it is it's like in C0 continuous. They are in contact, but then they are not smooth. When you increase the smoothness, you can see that it is analogous to getting it to C1 continuity. And then if it is like super smooth, then it is analogous to getting it to C2 continuity. Yeah. So proceeding with that, now there are no holes in it, so I'll simply go to the next step and deselect this, select this, and save the model. When you save the model in this stage, it will be saving as a part file. So SolidWorks saves all its part file as .prt. So you'll be able to save it here. And the same step continues. So go to the curvature wizard and then fit the curve, fit the boundary here. So in case here is the boundary. So in 2D modeling, the boundary is very important. So which will be useful for you in later stages. So for example, like I've selected boundary here and then selected this. And if you select the boundary curve 1, so this is your boundary curve. So this is an approximated spline curve, which 3D spline curve, which the software has created for you, which you can later alter. Simply going to accept this for now. Now you can see that the software has created a separate 3D sketch for you. Now you can edit this sketch. You can drag and drop these points in a way that it best represents your model. Now mind you, this is a 3D sketch, right? So you go to one particular, like either in front view or side view, and then try to approximate it. Otherwise it will happen something like this, which you will never know like in which direction it went. So from side view and top view, I'm approximating it. Yeah, and yeah, you can also delete certain points if you think they're overkill. I'm simply going to accept this for now. Yeah. Now coming to the curvature again. So there's another thing called section, like I told you earlier. So let's create a section curve and see what happens now. So go to reference geometry and create a plane. I give my frame of reference as the front plane. So I'll be getting a plane parallel to my front plane. So I'll simply increase the offset here. Halfway through. and toolbars, scan to 3D to curvature section, and to select my plane I select this and my point, this point. Apply. It is processing. Probably take more time, but if you have a good machine, you can do this pretty fast. Then I think it's not possible to show this now. So I'll simply quit it, and the last step, as always, is the surface wizard. So click on here. We have a mesh which is abstracted. Then go next. Now first let's try to get the automated creation one, and then later we'll try on the guided creation one. First, in the automated one, what happens here is I select almost like 1/4 of the right, and when you give this is an interesting feature here. So when you give this edit feature line, what happens is you'll get the feature line, which it is representing to make the patches. So if I go to the smooth view, you will see that now there are 3 patches here. And this orange line that you see is the reference line which the software is taking to define these patches. So, let's say in case I know there is another reference line that is a line connecting this and this. So the curvature on one side is higher and the other side is lower. So what this as a designer I know. So but the software didn't capture it. So what I can do is I can simply create a reference line in the middle. Select this point. Come here and then get another point selected in the middle somewhere approximately, and then you can update feature. Now you can see that the number of patches have increased. So earlier there were only 3 patches. So now when you gave this line, you can see that the number of patches has increased and it is quite smooth. It can be still smoother, but for this kind of model, I think this is the smoothness is acceptable for for the 3D printing range. And we go to the next. Now this is the kind of surface that we have come up with. So we go to the hard model. So this is the patch of surfaces that you have come up with. So you click on OK to accept these surfaces. So now you will have imported surface. So this surface is the normal surface that you use in the SolidWorks here. So here then you can extrude this, trim this with other surfaces. You can knit it with other surface. You can thicken this. You see, but there are discrepancies here now. So what has happened here is that you can see that the curvature here is high. So there is some discrepancies. So now how you can check for discrepancies is you select the imported surfaces, go to evaluate, and then check for curvature. Yeah, now you see here that the curvature values are pretty smooth in this region, and it is like jumbled here, but then it is very bad here. So there is a sudden drop in color or sudden drop in curvature, as you can see here. So what you have to do is go back to the curvature thing and then set the B-spline here correct. Now since this is automatic, there is no much thing that we can do here, but then I will delete this and then do it in the guided way. Like in surface wizard, you get 2 options. One is the automatic and one is the guided creation. Now automatic, I have already told you how it is happening. Now guided creation, what happens is SolidWorks has a definite set of operations with which all surfaces or all bodies in SolidWorks is created. For example, extrude, revolve, loft, join to surfaces, trimming them, and so on and so forth. So what guided creation will allow you is it will guide you toward this set of processes where you can select or you can see behind the screen like what are the operations that SolidWorks is using in order to get this get your surface. So I'm going to click proceed further. Now it is asking for a split plane. Split plane is nothing but a symmetrical plane, which I can click, and then I can do only one half of the model and it will get mirrored. But since our product is not symmetric, I'm simply going to go further. Now you can see here that there is the user interface here is simple. So the analogy that they have given is about a sketching analogy. So if you decrease the sensitivity, you can see that there are different number of colors coming up, showing that there are different numbers of operations. So each color represents one particular operation. So it is basically saying that this small blue diamond is made of a separate operation. And if you increase it, now you can see that this entire peach color is made of a separate operation. This yellow color is made of a separate operation, and so on and so forth. So if I increase the sensitivity to the maximum setting, it is understood by SolidWorks that this entire thing is made by a simple and a single operation, which is nothing but a set of curves that is defining this entire patch. So you can also, what you can do is you can also cancel this and you can manually color in case you know that this part has to be, for example, I'm saying this side has to be made in a separate operation and the other side has to be made in a separate operation. You just go to paint tools and separate one set of patches here in this color. This doesn't make sense here because everything can be made into a single operation. But then imagine, in case if you have a small depression here, then you know that the depression is being created by a separate production operation, like it is being either stamped or at later stages it is happening. So you can put a separate color there to show that don't do these surfaces together; they are different. So create the surfaces first, and then this surface is getting created later. I'm going to a new color and click and select these colors. Now how the SolidWorks understands is that this color is being created in a single operation and this color is being created in a single operation. Now if you click further, now you can see that you can extract faces. So if you click on extract faces, you will see that the second half, that is this part of thing, is best represented by this yellow pen. Now there are different methods which you can represent it. The best way to represent it is in the form of B-splines because you will have more control over how you are doing it. So click on B-spline. So you see here that this patch is best approximated by this B-spline curve. So you will have UV curves, and here what happens is that it is a extrapolation of the surface. So if I go to next and accept it, take out the curvature. So these are the two surfaces that best approximate the patches. Now with these two surfaces, what you can do is you can always go to the top view and then draw the top view of your model and then trim the extra parts. So here what has happened here is that you get the curve as an approximation and then you draw the boundary so that you can get the part. So as an example, let's say I'm going to draw a plane like this. Right plane. And yeah. So let's suppose our part is like this. You look from the top view, it is going to be like this, but then the curve surface is like this. So you can trim the surface using this surface options. I think most of you will be familiar with that. So you can have this trim surface and then select the surfaces and then trim with this curve available to get the necessary shapes that you want. So this is the summary of like how to convert point cloud into 3D models as well as surfaces. So if you have any doubt or like if I can help you with anything else, you can please ask.
Yeah, hello Deepak.
Hi Shankar.
Yeah, I have a question. Like in this example, you told that you can convert a point cloud data into a 3D model and you can do all sort of editing. Can it be done in reverse? Like I model a 3D model and can I get a point cloud data from SolidWorks? Is there an option like that?
I don't know if there is any option like that, but then there will be no use for such a data. Like in SolidWorks, what happens is that if you build a 3D model, let's say you are making a cuboid, so it is defined by particular set of equations, right? So even if you get a cloud model, it's going to be the best approximation that you get. So with that cloud model, you will not be able to process anything further.
Actually, do you know any other software where I can do like this? I have a 3D model. I need to have a point cloud data from that. So do you know any?
What is your motivation, Shankar, for this? Like any application?
Yeah, I'm currently doing something on robotics where I need a point cloud data for a 3D model. That's my application.
Oh, okay.
So you can 3D print it and 3D scan it.
No, without doing that, I want to do.
I think Alias might allow you to do that, converting
What
SolidWorks
you
or
need is a
solid
mesh
models
for
to
this.
point.
A mesh, yeah. You need a mesh model, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think you should be able to do it in CATIA, I think. In CATIA.
Okay, okay. I'll give it a try. Sure, thank you.
Any other questions? Are there no questions? Am I connected?
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So anybody?
Hello, Kumari.
Yes.
Yeah, you said that you'll be sharing us a point cloud data file, right?
Yeah.
And we are required to generate a 3D model from that. Is that right?
3D surface, yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay, right. Thank you.
Okay, so you can do it in, we showed in SolidWorks, but you can do it in Alias also. Okay. So I'll share you a tutorial for Alias if you would like to do it in that. Or you can use SolidWorks itself. It's up to you. I will check with the professor if he wants or just practice. Okay, so I'll confirm if it would be graded. Because last conversation I had, it was not to give any other new assignment. So let me check with him and then I'll confirm.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any questions to Deepak? Deepak, can we do meshing in SolidWorks?
Sorry?
That meshing?
Yeah, meshing can be done in SolidWorks. You can convert the solid model into a mesh model.
Okay. So Shankar, you might be able to use SolidWorks itself for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because you have the license already, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no other questions, okay. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you
for your session. Okay, it was very good in short notice. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So if there are any questions, I'll pass them on to you.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye. So we'll end the class now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.